On an off day. What does everybody do on their off day? The players are all out golfing, hiking, doing things. I'm here with you. I have nothing against being with you, but this is the dedication that we put in. Anyway, this is YouTube Live. I'm Evan Grant, your friendly Rangers insider from the Dallas Morning News and DallasNews.com. If you've happened here for the first time, great to have you. If you're a return customer, I think you know what to expect. Put out the disclaimer real quick before we get started on Rangers talk. If you can, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. It gives us a real good sense of how many people we're reaching. Please like it as well. And I think that's about it. You know, you can follow me in the Dallas Morning News and DallasNews.com. You can follow me on Twitter and at Blue Sky. Both places it's Evan P. Grant. On Twitter it's Evan _ P _ Grant. But that's about all I've got to offer you, except for, it is the dog days of summer when you just stop shaving. So, dog days of spring training, I should say, as Skip Schumacher referred to it just before the off day. But we are here in the middle of camp. When the Rangers take the field on Thursday, who are they playing tomorrow? That's the bad thing about spring training is you never know who they're playing. The Rangers tomorrow, on March 12th, will be at home against the Athletics in Surprise, and with that, let's just say that there are 2 weeks to go to opening day in Philadelphia, and they're really at the midpoint of the spring training schedule. It's a good time to really kind of take the pulse of where this team's at. I'll make just a couple quick statements. I think the offense, and I'm writing a column about this as we speak, I'm not writing it as we speak, but after we speak, about where the offense is compared to where it was a year ago. And I think it was about this point in time last spring that Chris Young really started to get anxious because he was seeing some things in the offense that he didn't like. And I'll discuss that in a column that should hopefully go up on DallasNews.com before the end of the afternoon. But all had to do with swing decisions and internal metrics that basically apply to how smart a guy's approach was. Last spring, it either indicated that the Rangers' approach was not very good, or that their commitment to an approach was not very good. So there's been a lot of improvement to this point, and I'd suggest that I don't think there will be a ton of movement one way or another after we get through this off day. You will start to see regulars playing a little bit longer, so the team numbers might not, the team numbers you'd think might go up a little bit, but at the same point in time, they're going to see more major league pitchers all the way through. So I think that will neutralize it. But at this point in time, the Rangers are a bit above league average in all the kind of internal metrics that you look for. Their strikeout percentage is down from this point last spring. Their walk percentage is up almost double. Their chase rate is down about 25% from where it was last year. And their whiff rate, their swing and miss rate. Chase, when I talk chase, the way I calculate it is all swings on pitches out of the zone. Whiff rate is obviously swings and misses. So their whiff rate's down about 5%, and their strikeout rate is down about 5%. Those are all good indicators of a better team-wide approach. And I think, look, in the last couple of days, as you've seen more and more of the Rangers regulars start to play together, you saw what that can end up providing. Saturday in Scottsdale, or when was it? A few days ago. Evan Carter, first inning grand slam after guys ahead of him worked counts, got on base. He hit a grand slam. 4-run first inning. Yesterday, Corey Seager's batting third, had the first two guys reach ahead of him, drives a 3-run homer. I know it's spring training and all that. Those balls were both well struck, but my point here is last year the Rangers had 8 games where they scored as many as 3 runs in the first inning. It happened about once a month. Here it happened twice in a week, and you have to think that hey, the results are okay too. So I'm gonna get to your questions on this other stuff, but the only other thing I'll mention is I know there's a question about the bullpen, um, and let's just highlight that, Joey. Well, it's from Tor Greg, who wants to know how do you see the bullpen shaking out? Can this team compete without a clear closer? And that is, I think the ongoing question is how is this bullpen going to end up looking when spring training is all said and done? There isn't a clear closer. There isn't an established closer. The guy who had the most closing experience, Alexis Diaz, has really kind of hurt his chances of making the team with his most recent walk field outing in which he didn't retire a batter. I think there's a lot of work still to be done to figure out the bullpen. I won't be surprised if the Rangers end up grabbing a guy either off waivers at the end of spring or getting a non-roster player who's not going to make another team. I don't think Gavin Collier is ready to pitch in the bullpen. Maybe if this team didn't have a Rule 5 pick that it would need to protect, it could carry Gavin Collier, but I think the Rangers would more like to see him go and do it regularly at AAA and pitch in high leverage situations there as opposed to being the last guy in the bullpen. I don't know that. I do think Carter Baumler, the Rule 5 pick, is probably better than 60% chance to make the team. But really, the only guys who I think are guaranteed at this point to be in this bullpen are Chris Martin, uh, Robert Garcia, Tyler Alexander, who's pitched really well, um, Jacob Junis, and I think Baumler is better than 50%. So you've got 5 jobs. Did I miss anybody there? Joey, you need to really keep track of me on this. I'm talking to our producer, the great Joey Hayden. Um, but let's just double check the media guide, make sure I didn't overlook anybody. Uh, in terms of guys who will make that bullpen. I think Josh Spores is really improving his chances. I think initially there was thought that he was going to go to the minor leagues to start the year, but I think he's really improving his chance. Um, yeah, I do. Oh, Cole Winn. I missed Cole Winn. So there are probably 6 jobs spoken for, with 2 jobs open, and that's got to be decided in the last 10 days. So with that, let's get to questions because you guys are hopping with the questions, man. It's hopping in here already. I love it. Uh, Charles Tucker is going to be our leadoff man today. Charles wants to know that since Mark Canna can play more positions than McCutcheon, does he have an edge? Is it possible both make the team? All right, let's answer this in backward order, I guess. I don't see a situation where the Rangers carry 2 older right-handed type platoon guys on their bench. Barring an injury, I don't see a route where both can make it. I would have thought that Canna had a pretty distinct advantage by having spent 2 more weeks in camp, but McCutcheon has come out in his first 2 games firing. Doubles in both games, had some 3-2 counts. He struck 3 or 4 balls over 100 miles an hour. He's looked really good and really ready for the task. Canna has also had a good spring. Um, he is 290. He was hitting 290 going into or after yesterday, I think, with a 737 OPS somewhere around there. Um, I think he's got a little bit of an edge still because he's probably a little bit more capable of playing the outfield than McCutcheon is at this point. I think Andrew McCutcheon has played um, 7 games in the outfield over the last 2 or 3 years. Really hasn't played the outfield at all. He did go out there and start the other day, but the Rangers, I think, it looks like Canna's a little bit more capable in the outfield right now than McCutcheon might be. And Canna can play some first base as well and give you a right-handed, another right-handed bat that could go in and play first base if you need it behind Jake Berger. Um, I think a real key factor is this is still to be determined over the final 10 days in Arizona, And I also think it's very possible that given McCutcheon's late start, the Rangers might ask him to go to um, Round Rock, play every day down there, get some more at bats for the first 2 weeks of the season, with the idea that either, you know, they'll make that they may look at, to bring him up, or that he'd be in a better position to grab a job with another team because he's really auditioning for all 30 teams. When you come in that late, there's no guarantee you're going to make this team, and if you're trying to extend your career, you're considering your possibilities of other rosters as well. As I explained it to somebody the other day, you know, there was some connection that McCutcheon, or some chatter that McCutcheon might be the guy Atlanta looked to after Jerks and Profar was suspended. But he didn't hear immediately and didn't hear anything definitively on the Braves, and so McCutcheon thought the best thing he could do would be to get into camp as quickly as possible, get to playing, and let things sort themselves out. He'll worry about whether he makes the roster later on, and he'll worry about what his other opportunities are. So I hope that answered that question. We got to the bullpen question. Gene wants to know if Duran is going to make the opening day roster. I think, in all likelihood, he will. Certainly, he has struggled some this spring, hitting a home run yesterday, his first homer in a regular season or spring training game since September 8th of 2024 was a good moment for him. Uh, at San Diego the previous day, he made a couple of really nice plays at shortstop, and he's got an edge on most of the guys in camp who would compete for that utility job because of his ability to play shortstop and third base. Uh, but he also had an error in that game against San Diego. Um, so we're talking about the 26th man on the roster, maybe, or at least the 13th of the position players in all likelihood. Um, and I think the Rangers will give him the opportunity to have that coming out of the chute. They may also look to see what the infielder market is like at the end of spring training. There's lots of guys on non-roster deals who are veterans who may be more attractive. Um, but I think right now the idea that internally, with Cody Freeman down, with Josh Young down, but hopefully ready to play in games come Thursday, I think that Duran's versatility and his ability to play both short and third make him the most attractive option there. And you're not looking for that guy to crush balls because he's not going to play that much, or he hopefully won't play that much. But yeah, I think he ends up being the guy going in to the season. Doesn't mean he'll have a long leash, and I suspect that Tyler Wade will end up being asked to go to AAA, and he's a veteran utility guy. And if Duran doesn't prove it, Tyler Wade might be sitting there, or Cam Cauley, who will probably go to AAA. And if he absolutely torches AAA the way he's torched spring training, there's going to be momentum for him to be on the big league roster. But look, Cam Cauley hasn't played AAA baseball yet. He's had a great spring. He's 23 years old. The last thing he needs to do is come up and be an extra guy on the bench with sparse playing time. So I think it's in his best interest to go to AAA, play every day, continue to play at a higher level of baseball than he's played in the past. And if an injury happens, I wouldn't hesitate to bring Cam up and play him every day, even over Duran. Or if, as you get into the deeper part of the season, he may be your best championship option as a utility guy. So right now, the idea is to hold on to everything and get the most development possible for guys. And I think you serve that best with Duran as your utility guy, and Cam Cauley at AAA. Randy, the Rangers collector. Randy is hearing very little about Jordan Montgomery. What's the update on his status? Randy, there's not much to say about Jordan Montgomery right now. He is still working his way back from surgery on that elbow, and he's not throwing. I don't think he'll throw off a mound until the end of camp. I'm sorry if I'm getting that mixed up. Um, but the idea is that he would be potentially available late June or around the All Star break for the rotation. So there's been no change in his status. The only thing that stands out to me is, when he came over here in 2023, Montgomery was uh, he was a hired gun, and there was a lot of pressure on him, and there's a lot of pressure internally from on himself to perform to get a free agent contract. And so we saw a guy who was still getting to know people, was kind of reserved, um, who was very focused on his own projects as well as the team stuff. Um, but I think that what I'm seeing right now is a guy who is headspace wise, he's for a guy, particularly for a guy who's rehabbing, he's in a great space. He's really happy to be back around Jacob DeGrom and Nathan Eovaldi. He feels comfortable with the Rangers. He had his greatest success here, and I feel like he's certainly, we mentioned that he's lost some weight, but I just feel like he's in a great position to really finish off his recovery and see where things go from there. Um, I got to scroll back up here. Let's see. John H. Martin. How in the world did Mark DeRosa, our guest on last week's Rangers podcast, so I guess we put the Danhausen curse on him by having him on the podcast. But Mark was on the Rangers podcast last week, and John is wondering how he didn't know the tiebreaker rules. Yeah, it was. If you're just following, Team USA lost to Italy last night in what was an embarrassing loss, and it could have been a lot worse. Team USA rallied to score 6 runs late, but they were down 8-0 in that game. Um, Losing was bad enough. Allowing 8 runs hurts some of their tiebreaker situations, and not knowing the basis for the tiebreaker is really surprising. I will say this, I think um, with each year of the WBC, there are some tweaks to the rule change, and I think everybody that I was familiar with was talking amongst ourselves that the tiebreaker was run differential, and it's not. The tiebreaker is how many runs you've given up. So giving up 8 runs last night was really a tough thing for Team USA. Um, but it doesn't matter what I know or what I think or what I presume. From Tony, from uh, I think Michael Smith is running Team USA this year, right? And Mark DeRosa is the manager. But for everybody in the Team USA program, that should have been made clear that with the third win, they had clinched nothing. Um, that there were still tiebreakers that were going to be in play, and that they couldn't afford to lose to Italy. So it was a poor performance by Team USA on Thursday night. On Tuesday night, it was embarrassing to lose to Italy, uh, which started former Ranger great Michael Lorenzen on the mound. Uh, and I will say this: Mark DeRosa, at least in his post game presser yet last night, said he had made a mistake. He accepted accountability for it. Um, it just potentially puts Team USA in a really tough spot. If there is still a way, I think the Team USA ends up winning the pool if. Well, let's not get too deep into that. But all 4 teams, USA, Mexico, Italy, all 3 of those teams could end up at 3-1 in pool play. And where it goes from there is now out of Team USA's hand. So it would be a real big blow for the spirit of the WBC, I think, if Team USA is knocked out in pool play, um, especially when you got Tarek Skubal and Paul Skeens to pitch for you in the first round. It just wouldn't be a good look. But there's still a lot to be decided, and I think the chances are still a little bit better than 50-50. Actually, they're significantly better than 50-50. Because if Mexico loses, they're clearly out. They'll have two losses. So if Italy beats Mexico, the USA is in. It only matters if Mexico beats Italy, um, and then all three teams would be at 3-1. Okay, I don't know. I'm just rambling here, man. I'm sorry. Um, Rum drums. My question: what in the world is up with USA WBC team right now? Yes. So I just answered that, and I should have read your question on in my head, Rum Drums, first before answering it. But yeah, you got it. I don't know what's up with Team USA. It's just a bad look, and you know, if they are able to advance to the quarterfinals and they really put together a good effort and they end up winning this thing, it'll all be forgotten and be a funny, laughing story. If they don't, it's going to be a big story around baseball, and it will be the center of WBC talk in this country for sure for the next WBC. Uh, Mama Cindy, I think that's Mama Cindy. Um, who is expected to be the fourth outfielder? Does Michael Hellman have a chance? Well, okay, let's go around the outfield. Brandon Nimmo is going to be in right field. I think the Rangers lean towards Evan Carter in center. He'd like to play center field. He's certainly getting the out, and I think if the Rangers, as Skip Schumacher said the other day, if the Rangers are leaning towards Evan Carter being an everyday player, every day not being a hard and fast rule, but every day being just a classification of a regular starter. If he plays as an everyday guy, uh, for me, I think that would eliminate some concerns about whether or not you want him in center field because your situation there, if he was a platoon player, is probably that Wyatt Langford's going to slide over when Carter is sitting down, and so now you've got Wyatt playing two different positions based on the day of the week. I think if Carter is a full time player and gets an off day every 10 days or so, uh, you could slide another outfielder in there, even if it is Wyatt Langford to play twice a month in center field. That's not too much of a burden. Or you could slide somebody else in there. But you've got Carter or Langford in center field, and then Carter or Langford in left. The fourth outfielder is going to be Sam Haggerty, but he could also figure into the second base mix as a right-handed option against left-handers to replace Josh Smith. But he'd also probably pair up with Evan Carter as a potential option for him in center field on the days he needs off. But Sam is going to face left-handed pitching. He has torn it up here in spring. He's going to be on the team. I think basically, you're asking who's the last outfielder, and I think that still comes down to Canna and McCutcheon. I don't see Michael Hellman making the roster out of spring training. Doesn't mean he won't help this team as the season goes on, but I don't know that I see a fit for him on the opening day roster. And remember, Skip has said on multiple occasions that the opening day roster is basically a construct. That everybody focuses on that, but you are definitely going to have all these guys that are in the primary pool contribute at some point in time, and I definitely count Michael Hellman in that primary pool. Um, Tommy Martin asks if small ball is coming back to the Rangers baseball this year. I don't know if I'd say small ball, Tommy. I do think that the Rangers are going to try to be more aggressive on the bases. I think obviously getting Nimmo as opposed to Simeon and Garcia, who both were more running limited the last couple of years. I think Brandon offers the ability to be a little bit more aggressive out of the leadoff spot. But do you want to be aggressive with Wyatt Langford and Corey Seager coming up? If you've got a fully healthy Evan Carter, he's going to steal more bags this year than he has. Um, and I also want to say the Rangers were in the top tier in stolen bases last year. They were in the top tier in stolen base percentage. They were they were above league average when it came to taking bases on fly balls, on pass balls, and things like that. But yes, they can be more aggressive, and I think what you're seeing play out a little bit in spring, though we don't have a ton of data to show it, is the Rangers are experimenting with the idea of more aggressively sending runners home when there is going to be a cutoff relay. Uh, the statistical data shows that that is uh, an advantageous play. Uh, Far more than 50%. There's some ways to bend this data a little bit, but it is not a 50-50 play. It very much favors the base running team because in addition to your speed and everything else, it forces the other team to make two really good throws and a good tag, and the numbers seem to indicate that the chances of that happening are 25 to 33 quarter to a third of the time. So that's an advantage, and I think you will see the Rangers send more runners with nobody out from second on a single and go even from first to try and score on a double. And that's one place where they can be more aggressive. I don't see this team being a big bunting team, though. Though Smith can bunt for a hit when need be, he's a solid bunter. Carter certainly could use the possibility of a drag bunt or something like that if he gets in a little bit of a slump. It's certainly another way to supplant his or to supplement his batting average and on base percentage. But Evan is so good in um, when it comes to strike zone discipline that his on base percentage is going to be above average. And I don't know that he has to bunt unless he's like in an over and he really feels like he needs to be able to put a hit up there just to kind of get off the schneid. I think that he's got the ability to reach base in multiple ways and have a very high on base percentage. And I think this is a big year for Evan Carter as well. He's healthy, he looks bigger, he looks stronger. It's time for him uh, to really take a step forward this year. And I think and Kevin Sherrington and I were talking when he was out here this week. You look at Jake Berger, you look at all the guys who are kind of integral to this team improving offensively. Jake Berger, Josh Young, those guys on the corner, Carter, Jock Peterson, uh, Nemo. Um, who else? Josh Smith, obviously. You look at that whole pool, and you could make the case that from here on out, Evan Carter has the highest ceiling of all those guys. So it's not so much getting him back; to where he was. It's more him needing to blossom, and he does need to blossom this year. There is a lot of belief around the game that he can do it. The Rangers were asked about him in numerous trade propositions over the course of the offseason, even after he finished a year hurt. So I think it's certainly time for Evan to take that next step. Back to Charles. I'm not watching the WBC other than promoting baseball as a worldwide sport. Are there other benefits to the WBC? No, I mean I do think it's cool to watch these players really invested in these games. One problem with spring training is it's hard to get guys really into competitive mode. The games don't count. Um, it's more about getting their quote unquote work in. And so you're not creating that really hardcore competitive situation. WBC is that. Those guys are taking those games seriously. That is about competition, and I think that is good for guys. Obviously we saw Kyle Teal pull up last night, the White Sox young catcher with an injury for Italy, and that's not a good situation, and that's what everybody worries about. But I think the idea that this would help grow the sport and potentially grow the pool of talent around the world that you might end up drawing from, um, that it is a great diversion from meaningless spring training games, and that you can get some guys some really competitive at bats that they just don't normally get in spring training. And then factor in guys like Alejandro Osuna and Robert Garcia from the Rangers who are playing for Team Mexico, which obviously has played really well. But I talked to Alejandro Osuna before he left, and even though he's got some good outfielders here, I think the ability to be around Randy Arozarena and Alex Thomas, and Jaron Duran, all sharing that kind of bond of the Mexican heritage or representing Mexico and that Mexican culture, I think makes it easier for them all to operate as peers and talk peer to peer rather than older guy to younger guy. And I think that's good for those young players. I think it's good for their confidence. This is all in the case that I made for why it would have been great for Jack Leiter to go to the WBC and pitch one game, even as a long reliever. Just being a part of that rotation or being part of that staff with guys like Skeens and Scooble, it does a lot for your confidence. And confidence is important. It's important in this game. This game will humble you very fast. You guys talk about having confidence all the time. Then they go out there, and after they struggle, they admit, they might have lost some confidence. So, um, I see benefits to it. I also see some drawbacks, and for me, one of the reasons that I haven't been able to get quite as hooked on the WBC as I'd like to is the idea that the pitchers are still on spring training pitch kind of um, guardrails. And so you're not going to go see somebody go out there and throw a no hitter. You're going to see guys throw 3 or 4 or 5 innings, maybe in the championship game, maybe as much as 5 innings. And so it's hard to wrap your head around the idea that that's competitive, that pitchers are going to come out scheduled. Uh, yeah, that's not perfect. It's not ideal. And I suppose if you did this around the Olympic time and took a break the way hockey does, maybe you could get guys to be able to have a little bit more leeway with how with their workloads. I'm sure teams would have issues with that, but representing your country in the Olympics might outweigh that. Certainly outweighs it for most hockey players. Um, but while I'm not going to the stadium wrapped in a flag or anything, I do see the benefits for Team USA and for the WBC and the idea that you're growing baseball. And look, guys like these young kids that are playing for some of these countries where they may not be natives of, but they certainly have ties to all the guys we saw playing for Team Italy, some guys who play for Team Israel, like Spencer Horwitz and that like. I do think that there is this sense of pride that really drives them to want their best performance in those games. And I think that can pay dividends for them during the season. So that's the best I can answer for it. I just think that we all get carried away with the idea that like the pitching is kind of manufactured and this risk of injury. But this is a big deal for the guys who participate. They're not taking it as a joke. It is serious competition, and I think that's a good thing. And you know, if I had my druthers, if I had to cover one thing or another, I'd certainly rather cover a big game that takes place between Italy and the United States last night than potentially a meaningless spring training game where a pitcher is only going 3 or 4 innings. The difference obviously is that there's much more heightened interest for Rangers fans in the Rangers than there is in Team USA because there's no Rangers on Team USA. So did I suck up enough air on that? But hopefully I gave you a question. I do like that question because I've wrestled that in my head as well. Craig, Do you think our bullpen has addressed the off season, the later? Let me reread that. Our bullpen, do you think has addressed the? Wait a minute, the question got lost. Has addressed in the off season the later innings letting us down? Um, you know, it's unproven out there. I don't know any other way to say it. We've said this all winter. Said this since the start of spring training. I'll continue to say it. Yeah, it's a question. Um, there is no proven closer out there. The leverage guys, by and large, are unproven in leverage roles. If Chris Martin is going to end up closing, he has some closing experience, not really regular closing experience, but takes him out of that situation where he's really effective as a seventh or eighth inning. And so now your seventh or eighth inning guys are Robert Garcia and Cole Winn, um, and they're both perfectly good pitchers, but there is something, and you can't get a real idea in spring training about what their performances or how their performances are trending towards the regular season. I will say this. I mean, I do think for Robert Garcia, pitching for Mexico in a big game against Team USA in a high leverage situation in the later innings was more capable of being used as an evaluation tool than if he'd have been here with the Rangers yesterday playing the Cubs in a non-representative lineup from the start. I'm sorry, I'm boring myself, so I can only imagine what this is doing for you. I think that it's an issue that can't be answered in any way, shape, or form definitively until you get into the season, and maybe not even then. You may, just like the Rangers had in 23, they kind of had a rotating bullpen the first half of the season, trying to fill in the ninth inning role. Um, I do feel confident that if the Rangers can be in contention, real contention, come the All Star break, I do think Chris Young will look to add an established closer or an established late inning reliever. But right now, it's kind of a prove it situation, and I think everybody's right to be a little bit nervous, a little bit concerned. But the Rangers have also done a really good job the last 2 years of reconstructing bullpens on the fly with cheap pieces. So I think that they do get some degree of the benefit of the doubt here, but it's certainly going to be something that's watched very closely when from the season's outset. T. Henderson, with Alexis Diaz having options, do you think that more clearly paves the way for Gavin Collier to make this team? He certainly has earned it, and the team needs more optionable arms. Yes, the team needs optionable arms, but I really do think that the Rangers would value Collier pitching in leverage situations more than being the last or second to last guy out of the bullpen who might have infrequent opportunities to pitch at the big league level. If there was a path for Gavin Collier to pitch in a leverage role, um, and the Rangers were willing to take that option, I think the path becomes more clear. I don't think the Rangers are willing to put him into a leverage role right away. I think that's something that's going to have to be earned at the major league level, can't be earned in spring training. And listen, Gavin's been great, and he offers the Rangers something that they don't have, which is a high velocity arm who can flirt with 100 miles an hour. But he also has some strike zone command issues. Maybe not issues might not be the right word. But look, the guy, when he does miss, they tend to be scattered, and his walk rate numbers in the minor leagues are significant. Um, and so I think the Rangers would like to see that in a competitive environment once the season starts, and then potentially bring him up as part of whatever bullpen shuttle they have between Round Rock and the big leagues. I don't think he'd break camp with them, but I certainly think he could be in the mix very quickly. I just want to see very quickly while we're sitting here talking. Yeah, so he went to, at the end of last year, Collier went to Round Rock and made 14 appearances. So he's got 16 innings above Double A. And in those 16 innings, he had a 5.63 ERA and walked almost one batter per inning. The Rangers can't afford to have a guy coming out and walking a batter an inning. I know that he's looked really good this spring. I do also want to say that the WBC, perhaps a negative thing that the WBC presents to teams, is this: with so many players being at the tournament, uh, it's a little bit harder to gauge your pitchers because they're not facing as many major league hitters at this point in time as they usually would. You know, the Rangers didn't face Julio Rodriguez. They haven't faced Cal Raleigh. They didn't face Fernando Tatis. Um, they didn't face Alex Bregman. It's just there's a lot of major leaguers missing right now, and that may also impact the performance that you're seeing or the numbers that you're seeing out of pitchers because they're facing easier lineups. And so I think that's something that's going to have to be looked at even more closely in the final 10 days of exhibitions. Sean, with Kamar having a strong outing yesterday, is the fifth starter competition still active? What does Jacob Latz need to do to win the job? Um, I think the one thing Jacob needs to do to win the job is show a little bit a better ability to hold his fastball velocity. You know, in San Francisco in the at San Francisco in the fourth inning the other day, there was a significant drop. He had been up around 94 for much of the game, and it went down to 91, and that was a concern for the Rangers on why they'd rather have him in the bullpen, all things considered, than in the rotation, because his endurance level might not be ideal for a rotation. He's fine pitching 2 innings. He's fine, pitching 3 on a lot of occasions. But the Rangers wonder about both his pitch arsenal and his durability to get through a lineup 3 times, to get through the 6th inning, to not tax the bullpen. So I think that would be key for Jacob, would be to show the he can hold the velocity a little bit more deeper into games. And in spring training, when guys are still getting built up and facing these incremental increases for the first time, it's hard to tell if that's how he's going to react during the season, or if it's just like this is the middle of spring when guys talk about quote unquote dead arm and a little bit of fatigue, and maybe it comes down to boredom from the middle of a long month. Um, I don't know if that fastball velocity drop was due to Jacob's own fatigue, or the idea that he's just kind of in uncharted territory with a lot of other pitchers right now, and that's not that uncommon. Um, so, as for Kamar, it was a really good start yesterday. My initial take on it was that he didn't throw many changeups. I think he threw only 3. He's thrown only 5 this spring, and the changeup was a major project for him going into camp. Upon further examination and watching the game, and obviously after talking to Skip Schumacher afterwards, there's another way to look at it, and that's when his fastball and his other pitch assortment is as sharp as it was on Wednesday or on Tuesday. Who cares about the changeup? He threw the fastball at 96. He threw the sinker at 96. He used his cutter. And so he essentially had 3 distinctly different pitches going. That fastball, the four-seam fastball, was up at the top of the zone, and the sinker was down at the bottom. So he was able to change planes on guys a little bit in where their approach is at. His cutter is his cutter, and his breaking ball sometimes shows up as 2 different breaking balls. But either way you slice it, it's kind of a slider, a little bit tighter, a little bit more, I guess, horizontal break than a typical curve. But he mixed that in, and he threw all 4 of those pitches at least 11% of the time in a 47 pitch outing. So I think he's back in the competition. Whether he's the lead dog now, I couldn't tell you. I think with it, he certainly gave himself more wiggle room, uh, but he's had two subpar outings out of three, and I think Jake's outings, I think Jacob Latz's outings have all been pretty solid from day one. So there you go. Rarities. Do you see the Summer Olympics MLB players being on those teams? I think it's something that's going to be in discussion for 28, right? I believe baseball is making a push to be included in those 28 in those 28 Summer Olympics in LA, and the question is, how much time will baseball be willing to take off to give these guys the opportunity to really compete in the Olympics? And what dates will it line? What dates of the Olympics? How will they line up with the Ranger season? You know, if you could, if this will all fall around the All Star break, you could make the All Star break 10 days long, and maybe chop off a week of games of the regular season. Um, in Olympic years. You know, you go down to 154 in Olympic years, and maybe that provides the opportunity. It would be great for baseball to get that kind of international exposure, even beyond what it's doing with the WBC and how it's viewed in Japan and the Dominican and other places. But to continue to get more and more international exposure would be great. And I will say, it is fun watching these guys really fired up and into all these games. So, um, please tell me why. Tex, I don't know how to answer this to you. Please tell me why Robert Garcia deserves to wear a Rangers uniform after his gas can pitching last year. Look, Robert had a good year. He didn't do well in the closer's role. He made some. He's not a great fielder. Something that's always going to be an issue for him. But his overall numbers were good, and were quite good. We tend to remember with relievers, we tend to remember all their failures and not what they do successfully. He is a typical left-hander reliever. He's going to walk some guys. It's going to be a tightrope act, but he was a contributor, a positive contributor to last year's team, and I expect him to be a positive contributor to this year's team. And I think he will make some improvements on some of the issues he had last year. That's all I can say on that. This is going to be last question of the day. Um, Again, you guys, you have been awesome. I'm giving you a round of applause. Um, Before we get this very last question, thank you for participating. Thank you for bringing great questions. I hope you really enjoy this. I really want to be able to reach you on as many platforms as possible. And for those of you who do like the YouTube format, all the feedback you can provide is much appreciated, both by me and by the morning news. So keep watching, keep sending questions. We're going to try and do this on a fairly regular basis. I love doing it because it feels more direct and interacting with y'all than just answering a mailbag. So that's all great. And with that, faster G, I'm not even going to try. Not even going to try. But how is Josh Smith doing against the left-handers? Um, I think Josh is 1 for 7 against lefties at this point. But listen, again, going back to these things that are uh, process stats according to the Rangers, they've liked what they've seen. He's hit the ball hard against lefties, and it's led Skip Schumacher to make that statement that he did the other day. Um, that in all likelihood, he thinks that Josh Smith and Evan Carter have made the case for themselves to be everyday players, to not be considered straight platoon guys. Now, as I said earlier, when they get rest, it'll probably be against a left-hander, and I'm sure we'll get questions on Twitter about, oh, is this a platoon? No. But when you give guys a day off, you're going to look for the most favorable matchups you can find. And for the lefties, it's to give them a day off against a left-handed pitcher. For the right-handed guys on the bench, that's the opportunity when their splits are going to be higher. So you need to engage everybody on this roster, and you want to put them in the best situations to succeed. But I think Josh has done everything he needs to do this spring. I was very much, I think, public about the idea that I thought there really wasn't any competition going into spring for the starter's job coming out of camp. I thought it was Josh's. He's been an everyday player the last 2 years, even if it wasn't at one position. Question of whether or not he ends up losing playing time, I don't think gets answered until the second half of the season, when the past he's really struggled. If he is effective, he's going to play. But I think the Rangers will also, just like with Carter and his back, I think the Rangers, knowing what Smith's track record is, they will seek to get him some fairly regular days off. Once a week. I don't know if that's once a week. I don't know if that's once every 5 days. But I think they'll do some take some chances to get him some days off in hopes that he will be, if fatigue was an issue the last 2 years, that he will be in a position to be more fresh and ready to contribute in the second half. So that's all I've got. This was, again, it was great. I appreciate it so much for y'all to follow and for y'all to listen. If you've got further questions, I try and go back in to the YouTube comments, the digital comments under the video, and answer if there's some comments or some follow-up questions. I try to do that. Where you can reach me. Hopefully this Ranger season is going to be an exciting one and an entertaining one. I know for fans it was difficult to watch last year because the offense was so consistently insulting, really, in its approach. I don't know any other way to say it. It was difficult for fans of baseball to watch the Rangers' approach at the plate, and it really took away from what was a historic caliber pitching performance by that starting rotation. But hopefully this season will be much more interesting. We'll keep your interest longer. I've got my regular season predictions pretty much in hand. I try and not publicize them until closer to the regular season because I want to make sure we don't have any kind of traumatic injury or anything like that. But I do feel like this is a winning ball club as they sit right now, and so that's all I can say at this point. But thanks. I'm out of here. I got some more stuff to write, and I'm going to gaze at my picture a little bit more. But hopefully we'll speak to you next week, everybody. Take care.